Hi, my name's Scott Stollar, and you may have just inherited a property and you're probably wondering what the best thing to do with it is. You could be thinking about renting it out or selling it, and you may even be thinking that renting it out could create more financial stability for you and your loved ones years down the road. And while inheriting a house can sound like a great thing, this one decision can affect your finances and your goals for a lifetime. So it's super important to make sure that you evaluate this decision and find a way that works for you rather than just going with the flow and figuring out what works for someone else. It is important to realize when you're getting advice from people about what you should do with this is how do they influence the situation? Do they have a stake in the game? And what benefit can they get from the advice that you get or that they give to you? For example, I've met many people that have financial advisors that are great for their point in life. However, they may not realize that at a certain point, you actually need to graduate to a different financial advisor. One of the reasons for this is that many of the big time banks and the big time financial institutions like to clump people into certain buckets. They don't necessarily look at your specific situation as much as they look at your income and your net worth. And based on those two figures, they'll figure out where they need to put you or advise you to be as far as an investment goes. So when you go into your bank and they say, hey, we have a financial advisor who would want to speak with you, this is a person who's going to do that, and they're likely going to guide you to conservative stock. Now, some of them may be pro real estate, but if you really want to be investing in real estate or figuring out what's best for you and growing your net worth, if that's your true goal, then you need someone that's going to actually sit down and look at what kind of effect owning real estate will have on your net worth. So to tackle this, it's important to keep these in mind. And number one is that financial advisor. Figure out what you need them to advise you on. Do you need someone that's well versed on how stocks that you buy could be influenced or grown by additional rental income, especially if you don't need that income to pay your monthly expenses? And then number two, you need to keep in mind who you're going to be in business with. One of the biggest problems that people have with inheriting real estate and they decide to turn it into a rental is they don't realize that they're automatically in business with a lot of other people that they're related to. Here's an example. I was recently speaking with a client who owns just one home. And during our conversation, we had some legacy planning portions of that conversation. And while we were going over that, and I was asking them questions, this was the only home that they own. They own it outright, and they really like that because their kids' plan was to rent it out when they pass because they've always wanted to have an investment property but didn't have the means to take care of it. Here's a couple of things that I found out through this. Number one, the two kids that they have don't necessarily see eye to eye when it comes to finance. The two kids that they have also have very different sources of income and different levels of pay. The spouses of the two kids also have different levels of income and different levels of pay. And it turns out that the spouses of their children were more interested in owning real estate investment properties than the children were themselves. And to make it even more interesting, none of these people agreed with each other on what they should do in regards to if there was an issue with the tenant or how they should manage it if it was to be a rental. It's really important to understand these things because if you make this decision, all of a sudden you're in business with these other people. And even if all of these families wanted to turn that into a real estate portfolio, you totally could. It may be a good idea to look at how you could separate yourselves from the people that you wouldn't want to be in business with so that you could better invest in a way that actually achieves your goals rather than being tied to a business partner that you don't always see eye to eye. Number three is you also want to keep in mind legislative risks. Now, legislative risks vary by city to city and state to state. Here in California, we're not known as the most landlord-friendly area. So if you're relying on this to create some extra income for you, and then you get a tenant who can't pay your rent for many months on end, and then it takes a long time to kick them out, you'd have to carry that mortgage, if there was one, for that whole time while you dealt with that. And then you got to hope that the place wasn't destroyed or there weren't other problems that were costly, because that can sink a lot of seasoned investors. And especially if you only have one property and there is a loan on it, that can be very challenging for a lot of people, even with healthy finances, to deal with. So I always encourage you to figure out what you want that to look like. And I mentioned the word noise. Do you want really noisy, high risk investments, or do you want easy, more passive stuff? This isn't to say that places that are landlord friendly are necessarily more noisy, but they may be more risky, especially in markets where property values are higher and rent prices are lower. For example, $1 million home here in San Diego County may only rent for about $4,500 a month. Now, that same level of rent payment would not cover a mortgage if you bought that brand new and put 20% down. It wouldn't even cover the mortgage. You'd have to come out of pocket for the mortgage every month, even with someone paying you rent. So with that said, it's really important to understand what your financial goals are with this, even if you're working with other family members. When you decide whether it's a good idea to sell a property that you inherited or turn it into a rental, the first thing that you really need to look at is what financial goals are you trying to accomplish? Are you trying to create cash flow? Do you just want to have the money somewhere where it will continue to appreciate like real estate typically does in San Diego County, Southern California, or even nationwide? Over a 30-year span, real estate tends to appreciate in value. And some people hold on to it for that sole reason. You may wonder about taxes. Now, don't feel pushed in a corner with taxes, because when you first inherited a property, you get what's known as a step up in basis. That means that if you sell it after your loved one passes away, you get a stepped up in basis, meaning that the value that you got it at was the value when the person deceased. You get it at the current market value. So that's a long way of saying you wouldn't have to pay capital gains if you sold it within a relatively short period of time, usually within 6 months. Now, if you decide to turn it into a rental and you hold on to it for a much longer period of time and you have appreciation from that time that you inherited it, where you get the step up in basis, and the time that you actually sell it, there are different things that you can do, like a tax deferred exchange, or depending on the amount of appreciation, you could even look at moving into it for a little bit. So with all that in mind, what I'd really like you to do is take out a piece of paper, and on the top, just write down what's making you think that you should sell this, or what's making you think that if you hold on to it and turn it into a rental, that will create more financial stability for you long term. What's causing you to think that? And it's important for you to have it there so that that guides you, so that you know where your perception is in this moment. And it's super important to be transparent with yourself so that you can know, like, hey, was I acting out of stress, or was I really thinking about what I and my family need in the future? Now, after you've written that down, maybe you'll say that, hey, I want cash flow. Great. How much cash flow do you want? We're not just talking about this one property. What would your goal be? Do you want to try and cover your monthly expenses with the cash flow from it, or half of them? Do you want to be able to afford college for one of your children, or a vacation once a year? What's your financial goal for doing this? Write it down. And that's fine if it's not cash flow. It could be appreciation. Write that down too. So once you know the financial benefit that you're trying to achieve right here and right now, think about that in 3 years. What would it look like in 3 years? And write that down. What would your financial goal be in 5 years for your family? And the point of thinking about it in longer term chunks of time is that as you start going in 3 and 5 year chunks, you realize that this decision could actually impact you and springboard you into financial freedom later on in life. Now, once you do that, there may be a few different ways to get there. Talk with a financial advisor who can actually help you and guide you through on that. And like we said in the beginning of the video, make sure there's someone that understands your goals and are trying to support you by helping you accomplish those goals. You don't need someone to help you just to serve themselves or to help them make another sale. This is your decision, your goals, your finances, and your life. You should be the captain of that ship. The idea here is that we're creating strategic steps so that you can shape your success. Your success is going to be plotted based on these incremental growth values that you're finding over the next 3, 5, 10, 15, 20 years. When you understand what you want your finances to look like at that point, it's a lot easier to understand what the right decision is for you right now. Even if you don't know what that decision is yet, it's great, because when you know where you're trying to get, you can figure out a way to get there a lot easier. Oftentimes, it just takes a little bit of research and a little bit of knowing. And if you need help with this from a real estate perspective, if you'd like a free worksheet to figure out if a property actually cash flows or not and need to learn how to use it, feel free to hit me up. Just shoot me a text or send me an email at sellitscott.com 760-697-56, and I'll be sure to send that over to you. If you have questions on how to use it, we can go through that and make sure that you're set as well.